Hey y'all! Okay, so we are going to finish up this lesson today and turn our homework in. So let's see. Alright, so we actually, before we start, let's check our homework. Let's do a homework check. Okay, so we had to do number 9 for homework. So I'm going to work each of these problems out. Give me a piece of paper. Okay, so 11a, 9x squared minus 64 equals 0. So first thing I'm going to do is add 64 to both sides. 9x squared equals 64. Divide by 9. X squared equals 64 divided by 9. Next thing we're going to do is take the square root of both 64 and 9. I went ahead and put my plus or minus so I wouldn't forget. So x equals plus or minus 8 over 3. Those are your two solutions. B, 5x squared minus 12 equals 0. First thing I'm going to do is add 12. 5x squared equals 12. Divide by 5. X squared equals 12 divided by 5. Take the square root. So I'm going to put plus or minus 12. Square root of 5. Oops, sorry. Okay, we cannot leave the 5 in the bottom, but it's not a perfect square, so we multiply by that. So on the bottom, it's going to now just be 5. On the top, it's going to be 60. Okay, so factors of 60 that are a perfect square, it's got to be 4. 60 divided by 4 is 15. So that's it. 4 times 15. The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 15 will stay in the house. So x equals plus or minus 2 square roots of 15 divided by 5. Just like that. Okay. Okay, and C is 16x. Let me do 16x minus 2 squared minus 25 equals 0. Okay, so we're going to add 25. So 16x minus 2 squared equals 25. Divide by 16. X minus 2 squared equals 25 over 16. Then I'm going to take the square root of both sides, so plus or minus the square root of 25 over the square root of 16. Both of those are perfect, so that's going to be 5 over 4. I'm going to add 2. X equals 2 plus or minus 5 over 4. And that's your answer. So, ta-da. Okay, now we have D. What, babe? What's wrong? Oh, well, let me finish the schoolwork, okay? D, 2, open parentheses, x minus 3 squared minus 15 equals 0. First thing I'm going to do is add 15 to both sides. No. 2x minus 3 squared equals 15. Divide by 2. X minus 3 squared equals 15 over 2. Then I'm going to take the square root. X minus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 15 divided by the square root of 2. I cannot leave 2 on the bottom, so I'm going to multiply by the square root of 2. X minus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 30 over 2. These are both inside, so I can multiply them together. That's how I got 30, and then the 2 come out of the house. 30 does not have a perfect square in its factors. Its factors are 1, 3, 5, 6, 10, and 30. None of those are perfect squares. So I don't have to simplify that. I can simply just add 3. So x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 30 all over 2. Okay. All right, now let's look at E. All right, E is 4x squared plus 49 equals 0. I'm going to subtract 49. So 4x squared equals negative 49 divided by 4. X squared equals negative 49 divided by 4. Okay, so I'm going to take the square root. That gives me plus or minus 49, negative 49, and negative 4. So plus or minus the square root. Oops, I'm sorry, that's a perfect square. The negative 49 is going to be plus or minus 7i. That's okay. And then on the bottom, that's going to be 2. As you guys can tell, my kids are awake. I'm going to go ahead and do F, and then I'll finish this once my kids go to sleep tonight. So let me do F. F is 3, open parentheses, x minus 1 squared plus 10 equals 0. First thing I'm going to do is subtract 10. So 3x minus 1 squared equals negative 10. I'm going to divide by 3. X minus 1 squared equals negative 10 divided by 3. From there, I'm going to take the square root of both sides, so plus or minus negative 10 divided by the square root of 3. I cannot leave 3 on the bottom, so I take the square root of 3 and multiply by it. That is going to give me on top negative 30, and on the bottom it just gives me 3. Now 30 again does not have a perfect square in it, but I do want to take out the I, then leave 30 in the house, 3 on the outside, make sure I've got my plus or minus. Alright, so that's your homework check. And then you're going to be on page 139 today. So get your textbook out and go to page 139 and we will get started. Alright, okay, so like I said, page 139 is the page that we're going to be on. And the skill that we are learning is completing a square. Okay, is what we call it. Over here in the math terms, it says completing the square is the process of adding a constant to the quadratic expression in order to transform it into a perfect square trinomial. Okay, so a perfect square trinomial is going to be in the standard form ax squared plus bx plus c. But c is a perfect square and ax squared is a perfect square. So both of those are perfect squares. Bx is just used as a result of those two perfect squares. So I'm going to show you exactly how to do this using like a piece of paper. But if we look at the example that they have on example C, it does a pretty good job of telling you exactly what to do. If there's a coefficient, the first thing you have to do is get rid of that coefficient by dividing, and it tells you divide both sides by the leading coefficient, so we get rid of that. Then you want to isolate the two variables terms on the left side. So we want to get the x squared and the 6x by itself, so we move the 5 halves to the other side by subtracting. Then you insert a box to both sides, because whatever you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other. Now, to get what goes in the box, you are going to take b, you're going to divide by 2, and then you are going to square it. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9, and that's what goes in both boxes. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. Now, once you get to this point, you have created a perfect square trinomial. So you take the square root of x squared, which will always be x, and then the square root of 9, which is 3. And you're always going to have those two there, either with a plus or a minus, depending on what b is. Since b is positive, we have a plus sign there. If b is negative, then you have a minus sign there. Okay? Then on this side, you just add those up. Okay? And that gives you 13 halves. Then you solve just like we did before. Take the square root, you put your plus or minus, then we have to rationalize that denominator. That gives us our answer. Okay? So we're going to work the problems on page 140. At the top of the page, these 4 problems, this is going to be your notes for today. But I want to do that on a separate sheet of paper so that I have plenty of room to work, and I would like for you to do that as well. Okay? So, page 140A, alright, which is 4x squared plus 16x minus 5 equals 0. Okay? First thing that we need to do is get rid of that leading coefficient. So I'm going to divide everything by 4, even the 0. Everything gets divided by 4. That cancels and gives me x squared. 16x divided by 4 is going to be plus 4x. That is negative 5 over 4 equals 0 divided by 4 is 0. So that's the first step. Divide by that coefficient, if there is one. Okay? If there's not, you don't have to do that step. Then we want to create the space for the box, so we move the 5/4 to the other side by adding. So when I write this out, I'm going to write x squared plus 4x plus a box, always plus a box, equals 5/4 plus a box, because whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. Now, once you get to that point, you have to get what goes into the box. To get what goes into the box, you're doing b divided by 2 squared. b in this case is 4. 4 divided by 2 squared. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. So 4 goes in this box and 4 goes in that box. Just like that. Now, this side is going to be your perfect square trinomial. This right here, perfect square trinomial. So you take the square root of the first, x squared, it's going to be x. The square root of the last, which is going to be 2. Then the sign comes from b. So since this is a positive 4, I put a plus sign in between there. Then it equals, over here, we want to add those together. You could put that in a calculator, or you could add the fractions. Remember that when you add fractions, you need them to have a common denominator. So I need that denominator to be 4. So I'm going to have to multiply by 4, multiply by 4. So that's 16/4 plus 5/4. 5 plus 16 is 21 over 4. Okay, again, you can use a calculator for that, but just leave it as a fraction. So then we've got our 21/4. Now we need to get rid of that square. So I'm going to take the square root, which gives me plus or minus over there. Don't forget your plus or minus. The square root of 21 on top, the square root of 4 on the bottom. 21 is not a perfect square, and it does not have a factor that is a perfect square, so you leave it alone. But 4 is a perfect square. The square root of 4 is 2. Just like that. Okay, Now I just need to get x by itself, so I subtract 2. So x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 21 over 2. And again, that's 2 spots. What we are doing is the same thing that we've been doing this whole time. We are looking for where the x crosses the x-axis. So if you wanted to do this in your calculator, you would put 2 plus the square root of 21 divided by 2, and it would give you a decimal. And then you would have negative 2 minus the square root of 21 over 2, and that would give you another decimal. And those would be the 2 locations that it crosses the x-axis. I don't have like a scientific calculator here with me to show you that, but that's what you would be doing. Okay, make sure you got all of that down for A. Okay, now I'm going to do B. All right. B is 5x squared minus 30x minus 3 equals 0. Okay? Alright, so first things first, I need to get rid of the coefficient, the leading coefficient 5. So I'm going to divide everybody by 5. Those 5's cancel and just leave you with x squared. Negative 30 divided by 5 is negative 6x. Negative 3 divided by 5 is a decimal, so we leave it as that fraction. 0 divided by 5 is 0. Just like with the last one, we need to move this negative 3/5. So I'm going to add that to the other side. That gives me my space for my box. Always plus a box. And same thing on this side, plus a box. Now, do you remember what we do to get into the box? Okay. We need to do b divided by 2 and square it. In this case, b is negative 6. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. Negative 3 squared is positive 9 on both boxes. This is your perfect square trinomial. I take the square root of x squared, which gives me x. You should be seeing a pattern. This is going to happen every single time. The square root of 9 is 3. Okay? We take the sign of bx, so this one's going to be minus, because this is minus, this is minus. Okay? It equals, over here we've got 3/5 plus 9. That's going to be 9 and 3/5. But I don't want to leave it as a mixed number like that, so I'm going to do around the world. Do you remember around the world? You multiply here. 5 times 9 is 45, and then you add the 3. 45, 46, 47, 48. So that's 48 fifths. Okay? That is going to be here. Alright? Now, to get rid of the square, I have to take the square root of both sides. And remember, that gives you plus or minus. So I'm going to go ahead and include that because I don't want to forget that step. 48 definitely has 4 in it, so I am going to be able to simplify this, so I could do that now. And I think I'm going to, just to kind of make my life a little bit easier. So I'm going to come up here. The factors of 48 I know would be 4 times 12, I believe. But 12 also has 4 in it as a factor. So that's not going to work. This isn't big enough. So I'm going to try 16. Okay? 48 divided by 16 is 3. That's going to be it. The square root of 16 is 4. The square root of 3 is not perfect, so it stays in the house. So that's going to be, I'm going to bring this over here, x minus 3 equals plus or minus 4 square roots of 3 divided by the square root of 5. Now again, you cannot leave that 5 in the denominator, so you multiply by the square root of 5. That is going to give us regular old 5 on the bottom. On the top, 3 is in the radical and 5 is inside the radical, so we multiply 3 times 5. That's going to be 4 square roots of 15. Which worked out great because 15 can't be simplified, so I can just leave it just like that. So now I have x minus 3 equals plus or minus 4 square roots of 15 all over 5. Now, what's your last step? Add 3. So, x equals 3 plus or minus 4 square roots of 15 all over 3. Just like that. So again, what we're doing is just repetitive, just over and over and over again, same thing over and over and over again, just different numbers. Okay, let's take a look at C. C is 2x squared minus 6x minus 1 equals 0. Okay, what I'd like you to do right now is press pause and see how far you can get without me. So press pause, work this one out, see how far you can get. Okay, so now that you're back with me, I'm going to divide by the leading coefficient, which is 2. X squared minus 3x minus 1/2 equals 0. Same thing, same thing, same thing. I'm going to add this 1/2. X squared minus 3x plus a box equals 1/2 plus a box. Then, to get what goes in the box, we're doing b divided by 2, and we're squaring it. b, in this case, is -3. -3 divided by 2 does not divide evenly. That's fine. That's okay, y'all. Okay, what you're going to do from this point is you're going to square the top. -3 squared is 9, and you're going to square the bottom. 2 squared is 4. So 9/4. 9/4. Okay? Then, this all is going to work out just perfect if you leave it as a fraction. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of 9/4, the square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 4 is 2. So it just converts right back down there. There's no problem. And then it's a minus sign because this is a minus sign. Equals, over here, you're welcome to use a calculator. I'm going to just change that to 2/4. 2/4 is the same thing as 1/2 plus 9/4. Now they have a common denominator. 2 plus 9 is 11/4. The denominator stays the same, so that's 11/4. Like I said, you can use a calculator for that. Now we have to get rid of the square. We get rid of the square by taking the square root. So that's plus or minus the square root of 11 divided by the square root of 4. The square root of 11 is not perfect, but it cannot be reduced, so it's fine as is. The square root of 4 can be reduced. It is a perfect square. So now our denominator is going to be 2. Like that. Last step to getting x by itself is to add 3/2. So x equals 3/2 plus or minus the square root of 11 divided by 2. Just like that. 2 solutions. One's plus, one's minus. Okay, and last but not least is D. Again, I would like for you to pause this and try D on your own. See how far you can get. Once you've gotten as far as you can get, or you've gotten to the end, watch back and make sure you did everything correct. First step is to divide by 2. X squared minus 2x plus 7/2 equals 0. Subtract 7/2. X squared minus 2x plus a box equals negative 7/2 plus a box. Remember, always plus a box, always on both sides. To get what goes in the box, you do b divided by 2 squared. B in this case is negative 2 divided by 2. That's negative 1. Negative 1 squared is 1. 1 here, 1 there. Okay? Perfect squared trinomial. You take the square root of the first, which gives you x. The square root of the last. The square root of 1 is 1. It is a perfect square. 1 times 1 gives you 1. So the square root of 1 is 1. You are using a minus because that's negative 2x. So that's that. Okay, so over here we've got negative 7/2 plus 2 over 2. Because isn't 2 over 2 the same thing as 1? So negative 7 plus 2 is negative 5/2. So that's negative 5/2. Okay? The next thing we need to do is get rid of that square. So we take the square root, which gives me plus or minus the square root of negative 5 divided by the square root of 2. Neither of those are perfect squares, but I have to rationalize the denominator by multiplying by negative 2. No, not negative 2. Multiplied by the square root of 2. That's going to give me regular old 2 on the bottom. On the top, that gives me the square root of negative 10. Because negative 5 times 2, both inside the house, so you can multiply. And then I need to get rid of this 1 by adding 1. So x equals 1 plus or minus. The only thing that I can't do is leave that negative under the radical. Remember, anytime you have a negative under the radical, you bring on an I. And then just leave 10 inside the house divided by 2. That's your answer. Okay, so your homework is on page 140, and you are doing problem number 12A through F. So you have 6 problems to work on. This video is only 30 minutes, so that means you still have 25 minutes of class to work. So work on those problems. Make sure you submit your notes and your homework. I will see you guys as soon as I can. I hope y'all are doing great. Email me if you have questions.